ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Hi, I'm Patricia Carvelis, host of Politics Now, the ABC's podcast unpacking the latest political news. Every week you'll hear me and the sharpest political minds at the ABC.
The interesting thing about it is that the National Party's job in the coalition has been to keep those votes for the coalition and not let them slip to One Nation. That's always been their traditional role.
So join me for Politics Now on the ABC Listen app.
Donald Trump is on the move, throwing his weight around in Asia. But will he have the upper hand when he sits down with the Chinese President Xi Jinping later this week? Today, Global Affairs editor Laura Tingle in Kuala Lumpur on why Trump won't be the most powerful man in the room. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily. Laura, Donald Trump, he's on the move through Southeast Asia and, well, it's tariffs and peace that are key, aren't they?
Well, yes, the tariffs and peace, Sam, and the question is how much is actually being achieved on either front other than for show, which is the cynic's view of it, but I think, there's reason for cynicism on both.
Today, the Prime Minister and I signed a major trade deal between the United States and Malaysia, and together we took part in the signing of a historic peace agreement ending the hostilities between Cambodia and Thailand. We're calling it the Kuala Lumpur Peace Accords.
Well, he is, as we know, Donald Trump, all about America first. But Laura, he does rather seem like he's in his element on the world stage. He had a rather nice welcome in Kuala Lumpur, of course, with
dancing,
with some dancing, some of his own.
A fist-pumping, hip-swaying jig on the tarmac of Kuala Lumpur Airport, alongside Malaysia's Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim.
People can just look up that vision if they want to see it.
But they won't be able to unsee it, but anyway.
Exactly. But the thing is, it's just that he is so erratic when it comes to foreign policy, isn't he?
Completely erratic. I mean, Ukraine would be the most spectacular example of that. One moment he's telling Zelensky to just basically, you're done, just give in. The next minute he's, muscling up to Vladimir Putin. Next minute he's talking about tomahawks. The next minute he's changed his mind. He's going to have a summit. I think the bottom line is the world is trying to adjust to the fact that there is absolutely zero strategy here. There may be sort of sometimes a bit of an uncanny deal maker's sort of sense of picking people's weak spots, but, there are a lot of deals that aren't sort of stuck in cement, shall we say. And this is why you see all of these people sucking up to him, to put it in the diplomatic terminology. ASEAN, the Southeast Asian countries, have been hit really hard by tariffs. I mean, some of them, Vietnam was basically going to be on its knees. It was so exposed to America in trade terms. And so everybody was scrabbling to get individual deals that improved that position. But, the trade deal he signed here in Kuala Lumpur were basically to say, yes, we're all agreeing that we'll pay, 19% tariffs or 10% tariffs or whatever the number already was, but, you'll give us more money, as in these countries would promise more money to America. So everybody's just trying to minimise the damage, if you like, of Donald Trump on their economies.
Well, Laura, the ultimate meeting, of course, this week will be between Donald Trump and the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Before heading off, Trump said they'd be making a deal on everything. He was very, very positive about this.
We'll make a deal on, I think, everything. I think we're going to make a deal on soybeans and the farmers, I think we're going to make a deal on maybe even nuclear. What I'll really be talking to them about is how do we end the war with Russia and Ukraine?
But, they haven't met since 2019. And we do know, Laura, don't we, that President Xi, he is really reluctant to meet anyone face-to-face unless deals are already done. Mm-hmm. He does not fly by the seat of his pants like Donald Trump does.
Well, that's right. And, up until yesterday, I'm pretty sure that the Chinese hadn't actually confirmed there would be a meeting. And I think even more significantly, the crucial thing here that you've got to really emphasise is that China is the one country in the world who really has something over the Americans. And that's this rare earth, their dominance, not just in the sort of access to rare earths, but that they control so much of the processing. Now, that sort of led to this sort of spate of, in recent weeks, of them putting export controls on these rare earths. Then Trump in a fury saying, OK, I'm going to put 100% tariffs on Chinese goods, and it's gone back and forward and escalated and de-escalated. But underlying all of that noise is the fact that Donald Trump knows, as well as everybody else should know, that he's not going to be getting dancing parades in China. Not that he's going there, but for the moment, but he's not going to be getting that treatment from the Chinese. The Americans did over the Chinese, if you like, during Trump Mark I. The Chinese have learnt their lessons from that. They've diversified their economy away from a reliance on exports to the United States. They've built up this capacity in rare earths, which are absolutely crucial to so much of our manufacturing base around the world, and particularly to military equipment, which really sort of highlights the vulnerability of the US and everyone else. It means it's going to be a completely different dynamic to the sorts of almost charade-like treaty signings that we've seen here in Kuala Lumpur, for example, in the last couple of days.
Yeah, because who will be the most powerful man in the room? As you say, China does have the upper hand here because it controls 70% of the world's rare earths and it chemically processes 90% of the global supply. So that is a true, Laura, position of power. And even with this deal that Trump has done with Australia last week, of course, when Anthony Albanese met him, that does not change that fact. China still has the power. That's
right. There's this absolutely mad scramble, not just by the US, but also by the Europeans because of their auto industry to get access to rare earths, which, in parentheses, puts Australia in a really strong position. But, for example, Donald Trump's been signing more rare earth deals here in Southeast Asia in the last couple of days. So everybody's madly scrambling, but it will take time to bring all of this on stream. Yes. So it is an absolute box seat position for the Chinese as they go into these talks. It's interesting, we've had the Chinese and US officials, Chinese Premier and the Treasury Secretary from the US meeting here in Kuala Lumpur over a couple of days, trying to set up this framework for the discussions that will take place. And there's all sorts of bits attached to that. But it's interesting that, the great breakthrough, as they say it, is that at the moment all that's happening is that the Chinese may delay imposing the export ban on rare earths, not that they'll actually modify their position.
Yeah, the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on America's ABC, he's indicated that, hasn't he, that perhaps it will be averted for a while, but that is not forever.
Maybe 12 months.
The president had given me maximum leverage when he threatened 100% tariffs if the Chinese imposed their rare earth global export controls. So I think we have averted that, so that the tariffs will be averted. And we have...
All right, well, Laura, of course, tariffs, they're paramount, but there could be an elephant in the room as well, right? Because Donald Trump was asked about China's intentions in relation to Taiwan after his meeting with Anthony Albanese last week, and he had a really rather interesting response to that question, didn't he?
He did.
China doesn't want to do that. First of all, the United States is the strongest military power in the world by far. Nobody's going to mess with that. And I don't see that at all with President Xi. I think we're going to get along very well as it pertains to Taiwan and others. Now, that doesn't mean It's not the apple of his eye, because probably it is, but I don't see anything happening. We have a very good trade.
He also, I think, said on Air Force One on the way over to Malaysia that it would be, quote, very dangerous for China to act against Taiwan. But, I mean, there are two elements of that. The most conspicuous one being that I think most analysts would really doubt that position of military strength by the Americans now, certainly as it comes to Taiwan. I mean, irrespective of how many missiles, boats, ships, submarines, troops you may have, Taiwan's really close to China. It's not close to the United States. Just the logistics of having to actually intervene in that fight would be pretty extreme. And it's, I think, instructive, Sam, that Trump has had so little to say about Taiwan or even the South China Sea in general. You know, he's not focused on geostrategy, he's focused on trade. So he would see Taiwan as basically an irritant to getting a trade outcome. I mean, his language during that first term was, very aggressive and macho. This time he's had very little to say until that meeting with Anthony Albanese. And once again, I think one of the things about all of the pandering to him this week in Southeast Asia has been about the fact that everybody sort of feels that, you have to be in front of Donald Trump's face, right there to get his attention. And in some ways, it's sort of been good for him to be paying attention to our region.
Yes.
The Southeast Asia tries to maintain this absolutely fastidious middle ground between these two superpowers. They don't want America pounding around the place, but they also don't want the Chinese to feel like they've got a free hand. So they have an interest in the US maintaining a strategic interest in the region, but they don't want to have warfare on Taiwan either. So it's a very complicated situation.
Yeah, it sure is. Well, Laura, arguably these are, of course, the two most powerful leaders in the world, meeting for the first time, as we said, since 2019. They're in charge of the largest militaries and economies. So just tell me, who do you reckon's going to have the upper hand during this meeting? Because someone will need to blink or concessions will need to be made, won't they?
Well, I think so. Well, I think China and President Xi absolutely have the upper hand, which is not something that Donald Trump is either comfortable with or familiar with. So he's going to find that really difficult. I think he will, at best be looking for a face-saving outcome, which the Chinese, could, it's probably in their interest to deliver that. Or even if they don't deliver it, we know President Trump has an immense capacity to spin stuff as some great win when it isn't necessarily. So I think it'll be really important to really scrutinise this. But, the Chinese are not as exposed economically as the US is, either economically or strategically, as they go into these talks. So it's going to be a very different result to the ones we've been watching through most of this year.
And of course what happens really matters to us all, doesn't it? Because it will impact the entire global economy.
Absolutely. It's really make or break stuff.
Laura Tingle is the ABC's Global Affairs Editor. This episode was produced by Sydney Peed. Audio production by Cinnamon Nippard. Our supervising producer is David Cody. I'm Sam Hawley. Thanks for listening.